It's great to be back on this show to talk the most important issues that affecting South Africa. That's the goal. That's the mission of this show, the Phumlani Majosi Show on Public Policy. We talk about the issues that matter. And joining me is a familiar guest. He has been here before. He and I are going to talk the G20 summit. We're going to talk about inequality. His very fascinating column he wrote last week, published on the Daily Friend, titled "The Inequality Emergency is More of a Growth Emergency." And I'm talking to Jonathan Katzenellenbogen. He is a economics columnist, and he has been writing very fascinating stuff. Welcome back, Jonathan. How are you, sir?
Thanks very much. Good to be here. Thank you for having me, Phumlani.
Glad to talk to you. The G20 is this weekend, Jonathan. And, the theme this year is solidarity, equality, sustainability. That's the theme for this year. It's been to some quarters, to some segments, especially in the US, it's been a sort of a controversial, it's something that the Trump administration does not like. It's a theme that they do not like. Now, let me read what the current US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, tweeted or posted on X back in February this year. He said, this is his X post. He said, "I will not attend the G20 summit in Johannesburg. South Africa is doing very bad things, expropriating private property, using G20 to promote solidarity, equality, and sustainability. In other words, DEI and climate change. My job is to advance America's national interest, not waste taxpayer money or coddle with anti-Americanism." That's how he described it. So they have boycotted this year's summit, partly because of that and other issues. But I want us to focus on their concern about the theme itself, and that is inequality. Because you write in your piece that actually maybe the problem, that the focus should be more on economic growth. Explain that to us.
Well, I don't think inequality can be a goal on its own. Well, what in the early stages of economic growth globally, the experience has been the uniform experience has been with the industrial revolution, with the emergence of China, India, is that during these rapid stages of initial growth, for some years, and it varies, inequality increases because there's some who have jobs, there's some who are entrepreneurs, and as a result, inequality does increase. But later, some years into industrialization, it decreases, and it decreases as a result largely of people being brought into the economy and getting jobs, and later the emergence of a welfare state, which I would argue is, I know that there is a great deal of difference on this, I would argue is a necessary condition of economic growth, because better public health, better education, and more widespread education has brought enormous benefits in terms of public health and education, which feeds into economic growth. So that's what I argued, and I argued that if South Africa, which is a very unequal society, had better growth and higher and a lot less unemployment, we would be a more equal society. As it is at the moment, we spend around 65% of the budget on health, welfare, that's social grants, and education. So, and there is very little scope really in South Africa, according to the Treasury, to raise taxes. So that is a big problem. And raising inequality really does nothing. It has to emerge from economic growth. And the faster your economic growth, the more people are brought into the economy, the more people can have jobs, and the more equal we could be. Now in South Africa, it's since '94 the slight increase in the increase in inequality since about I think 2000, certainly after 2008 when things went bad, has been due to higher unemployment. With 1/3 of the population unemployed, we're not going to be a very equal society.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a very, very powerful point. You write in your piece that by aiming for reduced inequality cannot be a goal on its own, right? Or be allowed to replace growth as the primary aim. And then you further write, President Cyril Ramaphosa is hoping to lead a new international campaign on the reduction of global inequality. It seems that's what he wants to do. He wants to do with this G20, Jonathan. He wants to highlight inequality. Of course, he's pushing also for, for the green agenda and so on. And that's why the Trump administration does not like that. Would you say that? Because I have argued that in my, I'm sure you've read my my
Yes, yes,
columns. Yes,
very good piece. Yes.
yeah, yeah, and I've argued that it seems to me we missed an opportunity here, Jonathan, because really the challenge in Africa we face is high levels of poverty, right? Low levels of business productivity. You need stronger business productivity. You need to have an environment that allows for that to happen. So we have issues of governance, we have issues of poverty, because resulting from bad governance, lack of really fixed investment in the continent because there are infrastructure issues. I was reading on Bloomberg yesterday and essay about our energy challenges in Africa, right? That are really suppressing industrial development. It's a missed opportunity, I think. You agree with me?
I think it's an enormously it's a great missed opportunity. They could have done something much better. They could
Yeah,
have gone to Trump, and you need Trump's presence and said, okay, we have this existing agenda, but how would you like it changed in order for us? What sort of compromise can we reach? Can we say that it's changed to economic growth, something like that, economic growth and poverty reduction? Even
yeah,
poverty reduction, I don't think would have raised their raised opposition from the US. I think it's the push for equality rather that
yes,
they were concerned about, because that implies higher taxes and is against much of their agenda. But poverty
redistribution. Yeah,
reduction, or you could have made it Africa, poverty reduction through growth. And that would be a good compromise agenda. But I suppose that they didn't want, South Africa might not have wanted to back down in front of Trump opposition, and they really said to him, take it or leave it. And he did say that he'd send Vance, but now there's no one coming. But remember that there's also no one coming from Argentina and Mexico, and she won't be there.
yeah,
So I think Trump would have acted as the anchor participant and brought in others, because many would have wanted their one-on-ones with Trump, to follow up on many issues. So I think it's a pity in some ways. But let's see what happens. But I don't what they want to do with this inequality report that was produced by this panel headed by Stiglitz is to excuse me. What they wanted to do is it proposed making a permanent the creation of a permanent panel on inequality, on global
global.
inequality.
Yes, yeah.
And this is very much part of Stiglitz's agenda. He's a
It's been
fairly
his agenda for
left-leaning
a long
economist.
time, Jonathan. It's a long, a long time, sort of left, not sort of leftist economist. Yeah,
So I think that he might, so Ramaphosa might be able to, depending on what he can get out of the G20, if the US is not a participant, there's no consensus. There's a consensus perhaps of those present, but it won't be all of them, and it'll be problematic. But perhaps he can find the money, I would expect, for the creation of a few European countries and others for this creation
Yeah.
of a permanent panel to look into issues of global inequality. And so I think that is very much something that Ramaphosa would have wanted to come out of this summit.
Yeah, yeah, and of course, Trump is going to denigrate denigrate the the summit during the course of the next days or when it's taking place. He has already asked.
He's got bigger issues. He might just choose to neglect it
Ignore, yeah, yeah.
entirely.
But he has already asked us to what is South Africa doing in the G20. He asked that not long time ago, was it last week or so? What is South Africa doing in the G20? It's causing a lot of noise. The G20 this year held here in South Africa because of these political, geopolitics issues. And in your column, you write you have a section about Western guilt. Talk to that. Talk about that to us.
Well, I
Western
think
guilt.
I think this inequality issue plays on Western guilt over colonialism. And
Really?
Ramaphosa said, one of the big issues is, inequality. At the launch of the report, he said that inequality didn't start yesterday or in 1994. It started with Western colonialism and apartheid. Yes, but also no, because colonialism did great evil in the destruction of indigenous societies. But, at the same time, as Marx even said, it brought the steam engine, and with that, industrialization and better lives for many. It took time. It took a very long time.
Yeah.
But it did happen ultimately. Otherwise, I think much of the continent, much of India and elsewhere would have been highly rural for a longer time. It's not that they wouldn't have industrialized, but I think
Yeah.
that they would have been rural and for a very long time, and with all that extreme hardships.
Extreme hardship, yes. Extreme hardship. And I have I wrote in my column before yours was where you and I wrote about the same subject. And I was saying that what leaders fail to to acknowledge, and I think they do this for political reasons, and that is inequality. To be honest with you, Jonathan, it's always been part of South Africa, right? You could go back centuries. It was there even before the Westerners interacted, right, with with Africans, right? And people tend to ignore that reality that we've always societies around the world have never been equal, and that has been in a way a positive because, as I highlight in my column, the fact that you can have some people successful and others not, that can help those who are successful can be key, or they are usually a key to upliftment of those who are less successful. Because I mean, they when you look at the very rich, they pay taxes, they invest. You could, there's a plus in their existence, right? Because we can learn from them. They can inspire us. They invest their money. Some of them they spend billions in trying to uplift the poor in the world around the world. And that is a plus in my observation. So how do you think Ramaphosa is going to come out of this? It seems it's a controversial G20 given the US's position. Um, how is he going to come out here from a political perspective? Is he going to come out weaker or stronger? How is it going to play out here?
I think it's something that he puts great store by. I think that this raising in South Africa's international profile is very much part of the ANC and Ramaphosa's goals. They're high priority goals for him, and
Yeah.
always have been. They like the international recognition, and I think that they're part of the reason why they grasped at this opportunity and have been working hard at chairing the G20 is precisely this, to raise South Africa's profile. And I think they've been working hard at it in other areas. You know, they've got which is an indication of this, they've got um, better, call it, well, it's more than window dressing. I think the financial side of the economy is doing well. The rand has strengthened. We've got a credit rating upgrade from S&Ps on Friday. The medium-term budget policy statement last week was widely welcomed. Debt has peaked.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of economic good news, and this feeds into it and will help raise the South African profile. Although our unemployment rate is, a third of our of people of the workforce are unemployed, which is problematic. But nevertheless, so I think that just having world statesmen here, although Trump and three others won't be here, does raise South Africa's profile, but and could raise our profile as an investment destination if we had the right policies, arguably, if there's less red tape, if there was less burden of BEE, I would argue, and other things were in place. So I don't think that so he comes out as a winner, I would argue, but there could have been far better and bigger wins.
And bigger wins and bigger wins. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And then there's this question. Do you think that inequality matters to the ordinary South Africans? Because it seems to me that the obsession over inequality, it's an elitist thing, in my observation, right? It's the elite in the politics, and the media, and so on, that really obsessed about inequality. And when you go to poorer areas, right, when you go to ordinary South Africans, what they will tell you is that, we want jobs, we want safety in our communities, we want decent education, the traffic lights are not working, we have issues with the bridges, and so on. It seems to be an elitist thing, this thing of inequality, in my observation. Because even the polls that have been done by by organizations like the RR, which is the Institute of Race Relations, Afrobarometer as well. When you look at the issues that South Africans are concerned about when they are polled, it's things that make sense, right? And there's not really, to them, things like racism are at the bottom of that list, priority list. Things like even land reform, it's at the bottom. At the top are things like crime problem. We want jobs, service delivery. And one could sort of make a conclusion that, for South Africans, really ordinary South Africans, out there, the concern is about getting the basics right. The inequality seems to be a big political debate in the elite.
I think so to an extent, but I would argue that yes, jobs are the number one concern of South Africans.
Yeah.
Second is crime. But I think one issue is it's not big, but I think that there is resentment at those who've made it very rich through BEE, and it's a resentment at the post 1994 dispensation. I think one aspect of it, the 1994 dispensation, which has allowed a few people to get extraordinarily rich. And that, I think, people know that. And I think the polls show that there's not an interest in BEE because there haven't been widespread benefits. And it's seen as being very concentrated. So there's a concern about that in inequality. But there's also, I think people are aspirational, but I think that they, to an extent, feel that the system is rigged against them because of high unemployment, and in the face of this, that a few people have been able to get extraordinarily rich. So yes, I think you are right. Look,
Yeah.
I think that having a more equitable society would be ideal. I think it creates there would be a lot more resentment. People would see that there's social mobility, which is important, and I think that it creates a more consensual society. But that's not to say that do I really care, or do most people really care if a few people get extraordinarily rich because of their ability to either create large enterprises fairly, not through crime or other means,
Yeah.
or achieving a monopoly, if they've improved lives. And I think you can't be resentful of the billionaires in Silicon Valley or Elon Musk because they've improved lives enormously over the
Enormously.
past
Yeah.
30 years.
In a very, very big way.
And they've raised productivity
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
and hence growth. So
Yes.
it's I think it's a having a greater equality is desirable, but having a few very rich people, I don't think really matters to our economy.
Mm. And Milton Friedman used to ask people as to what do the rich do with their money? Are they putting it under the bed, or are they investing it somewhere in the industries that keep us going, those industries to be alive and employ people. So there are benefits. I would rather live in a country that does have rich people, Jonathan, than a country that has no rich people. you know,
Well, I think
um,
many rich people are creating more wealth, which
Absolutely
then,
right.
as you say, circulates in different forms. So if one is going to have growth, if one's going to have an entrepreneurial society, if one's going to raise productivity, if one's going to improve things and show that aspirations can be fulfilled in your society, I think they're often good examples of the very wealthy are good examples of that.
Yeah. And tell me now, the politics of this theme, right? In here,
And may I just add,
yeah,
and
sure,
may I
yeah,
just add,
yes.
and in most sort of just societies, they're highly taxed. In South Africa, our top marginal tax rate is 45%.
Yeah, but that to politicians, that's not enough. You've got a tax.
No, no.
There's no tax rate. That is enough. And so what I want to ask you is about our domestic politics, right? Let's
Yes.
talk about the GNU and this theme. Um, uh, do you think that the GNU partners are supportive of this theme, of how we've positioned ourselves during this G20? I know, of course, they have to speak as one, right? They have to try and work together on such things. Do you think there was any internal discussion within the GNU of this theme, and what should be achieved with the G20 at all?
I'm sure there was, because just 2 weeks ago, Ramaphosa met with the leaders of the other parties in the GNU, and they agreed on this statement in
Yeah.
which they all basically pledged allegiance to the GNU. And you would ask yourself, right, the medium-term budget policy statement is coming up, and there should be no ructions of that. But I think that the DAs anyway now are pretty much involved in the drafting of this at the Treasury, and they hadn't issued any warnings or anything that they would withdraw the support for the medium-term budget policy statement. But besides that, that feeds into budgets over the next 3 years rather
Yeah.
than immediately. So there was no immediate threat over that. but they wanted to demonstrate to South Africans and the world, and partially to avoid any potential embarrassment to Ramaphosa, that they were all on board on the G20 summit, and
Yes,
they
yeah.
wouldn't. There would be no votes of confidence in Parliament on the future. So I think that was done in order to line up things ahead of the GNU. The other thing that they did, I think, that they really has been working hard over the past 18 months or so, just to be sure that there are no problems over South Africa's grey listing, and that things didn't go to worse, and to ensure, above all, that they were working to ensure that it was lifted. So we are no longer on that grey list and no longer considered as a risk for money laundering and terrorist financing. So that was quite significant as well, that they achieved that. And I think that all that, was, they wanted that done on a sort of emergency basis at the next FATF meeting ahead of the GNU. That was very important to them, because after all, basically the G20 is at its core still a financial body, and you couldn't, having a host with on a grey list because of laxity over terrorist financing and
Yeah,
money laundering would be problematic.
yeah. So the removal from the grey list came at the right
Yes, yeah, I think
time.
it was very important. But very well done to them that they achieved it.
They've put in the right mechanisms to be
Yes,
removed,
yes.
yeah, from the grey list. I'm speaking to Jonathan Katzenellenbogen. He is an economist columnist, and he does political writing as well. He wrote on Daily Friend last week a fascinating column titled "The Inequality Emergency is More of a Growth Emergency," and we are talking about the G20 inequality, how we should approach it. I spoke to John Andrews, the CEO
Yes,
of the
yes,
Institute of
yes.
Race Relations, a few months back, and his view was that inequality should not be a priority. A top should not be in the top in on the priority list.
Yes,
He says that at the top should be the fight against poverty, and then inequality
absolutely.
can come after that, because at the end of the
But
day,
I
we've
think,
seen it. Yeah,
over the longer term, the fighting, you can't fight against poverty if you don't have economic growth. Not,
absolutely.
growth
Yeah.
doesn't trickle down, but you don't. But also, to fight against poverty and achieve greater inequality, what one needs is better governance. So you must, we have to make sure that our health budget, and our education budget are well spent, because those are key paths to greater equality. But in South Africa, we have poor governance and a high degree of waste, and we don't get our bang for our buck in our health or education spending, which is highly problematic. So
Yeah,
good governance has to go along with this, but and
absolutely.
as well as in poverty reduction.
Yes, poverty reduction. I have said, Jonathan, that our problem is not the money in South Africa. It's not that we don't have the money. What's needed is good governance. You need to know how to spend what you have wisely, right? You need to get the basics right. Ensure that the traffic lights are working. That's what I've been preaching, right? Ensure that
Well, what you've got,
littering.
more importantly, you've got to ensure that people like Babita Deokaram are not shot, because they are ensured they are taking their job of ensuring that Gauteng Health Department funds are well spent.
Yes,
That's
yeah.
part of it.
That's part of it. You have to have the basics right, so that people can give you a chance to invest in the country, whether it's local investment or domestic investment. But the basics must be right. And you write in your article that what did you say? I'm trying to find this. You are saying that in the last section of your piece, you write, our rigid labor laws defended by the unions mean companies are reluctant to take on more labor, right? Um, And of course, we've already spoken about BE. We've just mentioned it now. You write in the piece, and Black economic empowerment, which often enriches the already empowered, has become a new driver of inequality. You see, that's what people
Yes.
ignore, Jonathan. That what you call redress in the name of what's called Black economic empowerment, it's been a contributor to inequality, right? And as you said earlier, inequality has risen over the past 25 years or so in this country, right? So, and it's just it's baffling that you have people complaining about inequality, Ramaphosa and the ANC and others, yet want to keep the policies like BE that have been instrumental in worsening that inequality. you know, yeah, so I mean, on
Yeah,
on 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 on, on labor laws, which is what we've already spoken about. BE. I don't want to for you to speak about it again, but on rigid labor laws are defended by the labor unions. Companies are reluctant to hire. Explain that to people.
well, the problem lies largely with the wage setting mechanism.
Yeah,
So wage setting in South Africa is done by industries. And if you are over a certain size, you have to go to a special council where the unions and company representatives effectively agree on wage rates for that sector of the economy. Now, the major representatives, you can get an exemption from this, but it's difficult. And you have to go through another procedure. But wage rates are effectively done through this, but they're set at the levels that the union wants and the rates that can be afforded by South Africa's largest companies. So
mm,
what happens effectively is that the unions and the companies agree, and it's the larger companies that can of course, afford these rates, which effectively means that they can use the wage rates as a source of competitive advantage over the smaller companies. So smaller companies just can't afford very often to take on new labor.
yeah,
They're, in a product, the percentage share of costs of wage rates in a smaller company would be far larger than it is in a larger company, partially because the larger company has a far greater economy of scale. Therefore, and that is it's been said repeatedly that this is a major bar
mm,
to employment. And the way around this would be to create uh, dispensations for smaller companies. Pay them what you can afford, what they can afford to pay. And you'd rather have them take on new labor than not.
that note, yeah.
But the unions, of course, are against this. So what you have in effect is that the unions are well protected. But but this is one reason behind apart from Chinese manufacturing, Chinese imports, is the reason for the death of South African manufacturing. It's just
Mm,
unaffordable, and the unions have helped make it so.
yeah. Now let's close off. We have 5 minutes left. So Trump says that he's looking forward to the G20 summit in Miami in 2026. Some people have said that if the issues are not resolved by then, and by some people that includes me, they are saying that if this fallout between the US and South Africa isn't resolved by then, it could be hard for us to be part of the G20. Trump could make it hard. There is that risk. We don't know how big it is, but there is a risk that Trump could make it hard for us because apparently the G20 will be in his home. I'm not sure. I think I heard something like that in 2026. But I mean that's I don't think that's meaningful. But there is at risk. And then somebody raised the Soccer World Cup. I don't know how Trump would react with the US is hosting the Soccer World Cup next year.
Yes.
If he could
With
weaponize
Canada
that.
and Mexico.
Yeah. Say something about about those comments. What are your views? Any risk there? Should we be?
Well, interestingly enough, the host country, the existing host country, and the future host country have a handover for the G20. So, as president of the G20, Ramaphosa would ideally have would meet with Ramaphosa a number of times, and
With Trump,
their senior civil servants would also meet. But there are no Americans are attending this, so that's certainly problematic. How are they going to hand over this to the Americans? The Americans could, conceivably just start afresh. They don't. I mean, if you think about it, they don't absolutely need an endorsement from South Africa. Also, I think that as he said, as Trump said, South Africa shouldn't really be in the G20. We are, after all, a bit of an imposter. Our GDP is about 40th. It ranks 40th in the world. We rank 40th in terms of the size of our GDP. So that means other countries, and Argentina should not be in the GDP, but it has a greater reason to be. Their GDP is in fact higher than South Africa, so they're closer up. But we are in the G20 because of the Mandela legacy, and because it was perceived at the time when these were set up, when the G20 was actually set up and formalized, that we had good regulation of our financial markets. But Trump might say, do we really need the G20? I meet with these leaders periodically anyway. What are we really going to get out of this? And he might reject the idea of a developmental agenda. And also, you remember that it started off as a meeting of finance ministers. The G20 started off as a meeting of finance ministers.
Yeah.
And then after the collapse of Lehman Brothers and the global financial crisis, it was made into a heads of state meeting, a summit meeting. So it could just revert to Trump,
something smaller.
And they could meet on the verges of the IMF World Bank annual meetings. After all, these are economic issues, and the fora for that is the IMF and World Bank. Anyway, we'll see at the weekend, and we'll see the US reaction to that.
Yes, yeah. Jonathan, wonderful to talk to you, sir. A great conversation
and
as always.
Good to talk to you. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Awesome
All
stuff.
the best.
Awesome stuff.
Bye.
Great to talk to you. It's Phumlani Majozi. This is the Phumlani Majozi show. I was speaking to Jonathan Katzenellenbogen. He's an economics columnist. We're talking about the G20 and, of course, the inequality issue. We'll chat soon. You enjoyed this conversation, then do subscribe to this show, the Phumlani Majozi show, on public policy. I'm on X, it's economics. Majozi. I'm also on Facebook. I have a Facebook page, Phumlani M Majozi. I'm also on LinkedIn, Phumlani M Majozi. Let's connect on LinkedIn and talk about the issues that matter to South Africa. And I'm on to South Africans. I'm on Instagram at Phumlani M Majozi. I am on TikTok at Phumlani M Majozi. If you have any issues or you have any recommendations or comments about our show, do email us, majozimedia@gmail.com. majozimedia@gmail.com.